historically modeling has been limited to these point solutions, and so it results in these teams being isolated and off to the side. I remember being in a bullpen working on a network model and someone 2 desks over working on a rough cut capacity planning, making decisions that had nothing to do with my model, making decisions that my model was saying, don't do that.
It has been game changing in that reality, because we can be very scrappy in building a solution that we can use to deploy fast with the business, get feedback on what the key things the business cares, and then go back, iterate, and then get really sophisticated with what that we do.
When we do modeling, we are constantly using some level of prediction, whether it's aggregation, standard, straight average, weighted average, whatever it is, to make the assumptions that are around those data points more scientific, more informed. Using a prediction capability, I think is really powerful in changing the game for modeling analysis.
Modelers are hard to find. It's a very scarce resource. But yet, one of the customers that's doing the most in Lyric, I don't know, has a modeler by definition, and I'm constantly amazed at what they're continuing to build out and how rapidly they're able to build it, how effectively, and the value that it's creating for their business.
The only limit is, I think, your imagination, the modeler's imagination. The business is going to keep demanding bigger and bigger choices that they want to make, which will require more and more complex models to build, which I think is possible in Lyric.
Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast on the next generation of supply chain modeling. My name is Sarah. I am head of go-to-market here at Lyric. I have a number of people with me today, my favorite people, my coworkers here. We're going to go around and we're going to have everyone just tell us who they are and a little bit of their background and what they do at Lyric. Brooke, do you want to go first?
Sure. My name is Brooke Collins. I am leading the pre-sales team here at Lyric, and I dabble a little bit in customer success as well, helping with some of our customers. I have been with Lyric for about 5 months now, and previously I was working with the Walmart Centroid team, and I'm just really excited to be here.
Great. 5 months. I feel like it's been way longer than that. I'm sure you do too. All right, Austin, you want to go next?
Yep. Austin Haygood. Appreciate everyone joining the podcast. I've been at Lyric for almost 2 years, and before that I started my career at Coca-Cola Industry, did some consulting, and now I'm here in software.
Pushkar.
Hi, my name is Pushkar. I'm based out of Mumbai, and I have total of 8 years of experience, 6 of which is in supply chain analytics, and it's been more than a year that I'm working with Lyric. I mostly work into pre-sales, where I show off some cool stuff that we can do with Lyric to our customers.
Very cool. And last but not least, Luisa.
Hi, my name is Luisa Haner. Thank you everybody for joining in. I've been in Lyric close to a year and a half. Prior to Lyric, I did a lot of consulting in modeling and analytics, and then spent some time in Peloton and joined Lyric as a prospect initially, and then now I'm here.
Perfect. We love it. Thank you guys for joining. The point of this podcast, as we all know, is that we're doing something different in the world of supply chain modeling, right? So I know that when we talk to people about this, sometimes they're like a little weary or they're a little confused and not sure exactly how this all plays out. First of all, in the approach itself and also in just implementation. So I thought the best way to educate people on this and start the conversation is to get a bunch of people that work at Lyric who've been implementing this and who are tried and true network design people. It's close to my heart, people who have been doing this for years and have made this transition with us. So today we're going to talk a lot about what is it that's different about the Lyric approach to supply chain modeling, something we call modeling and analysis now. What did you think when you first saw it and the idea of it, and some stories about how our customers are reacting to this, as well as maybe some advice for people who might be starting down this journey as well. So we'll start with like a softball question. So you've all done network modeling for years, right? This is not something that like in school you're like, I'm going to do network modeling. So Pushkar, how did you happen upon a job where you started to do network modeling?
So I started my career in supply chain optimization in General Mills, where I worked as a supply chain analyst, and that was the on-ground stuff for supply chain network optimization. And then by the side, I was also doing this course on supply chain analytics, which is a course conducted by MIT on edX, and I really liked a few of the topics there, the network optimization, transportation optimization, and then I started having a liking for supply chain analytics. Unfortunately, I did land up into a network optimization role in the first go itself.
Very cool. And Austin, did you start at Coca-Cola in network optimization, or did you work your way in there?
It's funny, I actually worked my way in there because I knew I wanted to get there. So in school, I got very interested in optimization. Didn't know like network optimization, but it was just the concept of optimization, and got hired into a team where I was doing more transportation and logistics settlement, which was proximal to that network modeling team. But then quickly moved my way over there and was excited to be part of that team and doing network modeling.
Very cool. And Brooke, where did you start your career?
So I have an OR background, and I actually started in the supply chain team at Deloitte doing consulting for their operations. I discovered LlamaSoft through that team. They were a partner at that time, and figured out what network optimization was. And pretty quickly after I started using the tool, jumped ship and joined the LlamaSoft team. I was working with customers in that space.
Very cool. And Luisa, how did you get started? I know you're another ex-llama, or I should say former llama.
I had started with simulation modeling on inventory with my advisor. But then I was graduating, I was fascinated by airlines modeling. So spent some time there. Figured specifically for network design for the airlines is not so much about complexity, but about the strategy by which the airline is going. Then I quickly pivoted into getting back into supply chain again, and then I fell in love.
There you go. I love it. It's the love story. Okay, so what do you think has changed? So I could say a bunch of things, right? I think I'm the oldest on this podcast, so I think I could probably go back the furthest, but I'd love to hear from you guys on like the evolution of, hey, I remember doing it this way, and now I look at the demands of what the companies expect, and I look at capabilities too, like what I can do so much faster. Brooke, what do you think has changed the most since you started in this field to where we've come now?
Yeah, I think one of the most obvious shifts for me was in some of my early customers, we were advocating for how to prioritize an annual model, how to make it worthwhile to do this every year. And now as we talk to customers that are in the supply chain space and reacting to so many impacts in the world today, we don't have to convince them to do it regularly. If anything, they're pushing to say, we need to do this quarterly, we need to do this monthly, we need to do this weekly. So I think just the frequency has shifted so significantly since when I started in the modeling space.
Yep, that makes sense. So a lot of changes going on very quickly. Austin, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think it's been quite an evolution. So I started modeling about 15 years ago. So it's been doing this a little bit. So in a bullpen where we had 6 computers shared across 20 modelers, everything was on-prem. I think that's been a big change. And as a result, like everything was batched, right? You had to download, you had to upload, you had to do all those things. So nothing was repeatable. Now that we're on the cloud in Lyric, it's almost becoming more collaborative. So what Brooke is saying, that always on model, no one even knew to ask for that, I think 15 years ago. And now it feels like if you're not doing that, you're just leaving so much efficiency and opportunity on the table.
Makes sense. Luisa, when you first got introduced to Lyric and started to get to know what we were doing here, I probably did a demo for you, and I'm really curious to see, what did you think about it was different than what you were doing at Peloton at the time?
First, I thought this cannot be possible, but then when you actually showed me the mechanics of it, I thought how we didn't have this before. This was designed by modelers, it felt.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like the key value proposition is behind what a modeler needs to bring to the table, not only for the business, but to the day-to-day of their work, other peers. So that really just excites me. Just was a product designed for what I've done and what I expect to do, and what I love about modeling in supply chain.
I love that, because what we say, and I know that a lot of companies will say this, right? People have to say things in marketing, but I think we really did set out to empower the user, right? We set out to give the modelers specifically more. I've said this a number of times, but I feel like there was this weird world where the modeler was tasked with using this sort of rigid tool that had to be somewhat accessible by business, and it was just this weird middle ground. And there's now a platform approach just opened up our eyes, I think, in terms of what you can give to the different personas to allow them to best put to work their skills and make the best models that you can. Pushkar, what did you think? I don't even remember when your first introduction to Lyric would have come. Do you remember what you thought or what your reaction was when you saw it?
Yeah, so coming from consulting where I have been using tools all the time, it was a bit difficult to verbally understand how exactly can we work on a platform and how can we deploy applications as modelers. But when I joined here, I remember opening up Lyric and trying to get my hands dirty. It was a completely new experience because what I thought was, this is basically it. It has everything right in one place. I remember I just started doing some data transformations and then put in an optimized network within the same screen, got the output of the optimized network, and then built some visualization again on the very same screen. That was something that I thought will empower a modeler, and that became like a differentiating factor for me to build better models as well.
Great. I think one of the things I want to cover is maybe not everyone understands the different approach that we do here at Lyric, right? From this standpoint, at Lyric, what we're really trying to do is empower the modelers with the full end to create a solution that matches their modeling problem, as opposed to force-fitting your problem into some pre-built off-the-shelf molds. In the past, I think that seemed a little scary because it alluded to the fact that you had to do a lot of things custom. You had to build from scratch with some other tools that maybe weren't even supply chain related. But in this case, we're offering a no-code environment with pre-built engines, and we always refer to it as almost a Lego block library of things you can put together and create the solutions and the workflows that you need. And not only that, but you can do it today and swap out Legos tomorrow or add Legos tomorrow to make it fit. Everyone talks about sustainability or being agile, and I really don't see a world where you can be agile without this kind of environment. It just seems so obvious to me now. One of the things that I think comes out of this era that we're rolling into now as modeling and analysis is, and I've seen it so many times, right? This idea that companies were stuck when modelers would move off into other roles, or you had to have a whole army of skilled modelers. I know probably at General Mills, you guys had an amazing team, and some companies do have those amazing teams, but they're hard to keep, right? Once people get good at this role, they become good at a lot of things and they end up moving out. And relearning the tool itself with all of the hundreds of tables and levers and things is not something that happens overnight. And so a lot of companies just really struggle in that area. And I think I'm interested from what you guys have seen with customers and things along those lines, how we've talked about democratizing the modeling process a little bit, how that kind of comes together. Austin, can you talk a little bit about how some of your customers have overcome this with this platform approach?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Sarah, what you mentioned, being able to like solution and whiteboard your problem and get it to fit exactly in Lyric. What I find is so powerful with Lyric is that you can iterate, you can test, you can deploy, you can build and share, and you can do each one of those things individually in Lyric better than I think you can do in any other software I've used. And it's incredibly powerful that you can do all of that so well in a single platform, right? One of my customers, for example, they're a global team, right? And so they can actually pull and leverage information from other local operators within Lyric, build their models, while those other teams are also building and deploying their own capabilities. So I think that's an incredibly powerful model. And then One last thing I'll add there is just the even composability of it, right? Another customer of mine, they built a network model. We're trying to be really scrappy, so they were just pulling data where they could to get it together to build that initial model. And now they're converting that to an always-on model, but they're not having to rebuild everything. They're just changing the data they brought into Lyric from some manual uploads to now a data connector to Snowflake. So now they can just pipe that in and update that as needed. So it's really powerful to be able to leverage all of the work that they did to build the network model, not have to rebuild it, but then just pipe in the data from a different data source and then just continue the work that they already had.
And Luisa, I know you've worked with some customers too that have different levels of modeling skill, right? There's some that are heavy OR background, some that are closer to the business side. How have you seen that play out in some of the implementations you've been doing?
The ability to finally being able to differentiate between the modeling side and the business side in a way that you can get as sophisticated as you want on the modeling side, but still keep it on the business language in a way that the modeler can relate still with the business in the language that they understand. It has been game changing in that reality, because to Austin's point, we can be very scrappy in building a solution that we can use to deploy fast with the business, get feedback on what the key things the business cares or what the key things the business wants, and then go back, iterate, and then get really sophisticated with the output that we do. So it's been more than anything like the ability to give a solution that the business can relate to, and it's not necessarily too far just from being too sciencey or too sophisticated on a language that a business would not relate to.
So with that theme, right? So if we're saying that there are different kinds of users now, right? So would you say that there's almost some sort of spectrum of users that's now able to react and use these modeling solutions in different ways? So Brooke, can you talk a little bit about the different backgrounds of people that are now able to interact with this?
Definitely. I think that when we think about our modelers and you talk about the resource that is a modeler and how important that resource is to this space and almost how scarce those resources are, being able to bring other personas into this work is really important so that you are able to focus those modelers' efforts on what they do best. And so that's where I think we have that business user that can interact with the front end, being able to interact with an application or a visualization layer that will empower those business users that maybe aren't as technical on the modeling side to actually interact with the model and potentially go and pursue whether it's scenarios or model refreshes on their own, so that modeler's time can again be focused on what they do best. I think is really powerful. I remember in my history with modeling and delivering how many hours were spent refreshing PowerPoint slides or trying to get the data refreshed to go into a visualization tool rather than focusing those hours and that attention on making sure the model was as robust as it possibly could be. And so that's one of the things that I see as we deploy into our customers this platform for them to interact with. The other persona that I am really excited about Lyric celebrating is the data science persona. That is an area that is really powerful within this space, and being able to have those data scientists bring solutions that are tailored for their business into the larger ecosystem that is a modeling and analysis solution is really powerful. It makes sure that the solution that the modeler is building doesn't have caveats to say, but we aren't using specific elements that the business has adopted. All of that can be included in one place, in one solution, and I think it makes those solutions so much more robust.
I love the story of being able to leverage what everyone's best at. So Austin, I know at one of your early customers, I know you told me this story before, and it was so eye-opening to me when you first came back and said this, is everybody on the team had a different specialty, correct?
Yeah, this one customer, for example, one person knows all the data, where it is, how to source it, how to prep it, right? They can focus on that and make that available for everyone to tap into and leverage within Lyric. So that's really powerful. And then you had someone who had a traditional network modeling background, was able to come in, immediately pick that up and understand that really well. And then you had another person who was more of a specialization, BI visualization, and they were able to help curate and build the app and the look and feel of the app in a way that was like really fully informed. I think to see that, I think is really powerful. But the one thing that I would caution against that is it doesn't require that, right? I think what Lyric does so well is that really someone who has just a little bit of exposure to one of those, I think they can really rapidly accelerate their development and their capability in Lyric in that space. And one of our first customers, I think, is a great example of that. Could not agree more with what Brooke said. Modelers are hard to find. It's a very scarce resource. But yet, one of the customers that's doing the most in Lyric, I don't know, has a modeler by definition in how I would have had traditionally used that or viewed that. And I'm constantly amazed at what they're continuing to build out and how rapidly they're able to build it, how effectively, and the value that it's creating for their business. And I still don't know how they're doing it. So I think that's just like a really powerful testament to, I think if you get into Lyric, you start to learn it, I think you're going to find that you're going to be able to tackle more than you ever thought you could and even do it faster than you might expect. Brooke, the one thing I also wanted to follow up on, you mentioned the data scientist being able to come into Lyric. What are ways that you feel like Lyric can really differentiate the value a data scientist can bring to an organization?
Yes, there are data scientists that have full-blown models that they build locally, and I know that a lot of those skilled data scientists don't have the ability to deploy them. That work will get lost. And so being able to productize that, I think, is really powerful. But additionally, the ability to bring predictions into the space of modeling and analysis is, I think, a term that was used earlier was you're leaving opportunity on the table if you're not doing it. When we do modeling, we are constantly using some level of prediction, whether it's aggregation, standard, straight average, weighted average, whatever it is. Those are, in some cases, a level of prediction. They just oftentimes aren't very robust. And so being able to make the assumptions that are around those data points more scientific, more informed, using a prediction capability, I think is really powerful and changing the game for modeling and analysis. And having a space that is a true machine learning workspace within Lyric really just empowers our users to do that, whether they are data scientists and come in and can use that tool, or maybe they're modelers and they start to get into that space. I think to a point that Austin made where maybe they're not traditional machine learning model builders, but once you get started and once you start to engage with the Lyric tool, that it accelerates so fast what you're able to do and what you're able to build out.
Yeah, I love this topic because one of the things, you were involved in this project as well, but one of the things is people think predictions is like, oh, that's the end all be all. So there's predictions as a product where if you're going to predict if there's a stock out or going to be something else. But I think the really powerful one for modeling is prediction as an ingredient. So I've seen, especially Brooke, in another project that you were doing, there's a lot you can do with data preparation and having predictions help in that, right? And automating that. You're always missing data, you always have outlier values, or you need to plug in some data. That has been historically, I remember, and again, I'm dating myself, this is years and years ago, just having to fill in the blanks on data that didn't exist and trying to figure out what's the best value to put in there. So Pushkar, can you talk a little bit about how this changes the way you approach now the data pipeline and how we're preparing data for these models?
Yeah, one of the projects that I had worked for a client, it was related to routing optimization. And typically what happens is the loading and unloading times over there, they are extremely notorious. It's difficult to estimate that. If you use a blanket approach of just some fixed loading cost route, then you are not really accurate. Whereas if you try to split it for each shipment, then it's really difficult to assess based on your history, because even the same number of units might have taken different time in different routes. What we did with this client was they had a good data in terms of availability of shipment history. We ran a prediction model on that data to understand how can we come up with these loading and unloading times, a better assessment of those numbers and use them into the route formation. So this gives two advantages. One, of course, it becomes more accurate, and the second one is that it is dynamic. So if I run the prediction model this year with my last year's data, then I have some kind of a prediction model and a prediction for each and every shipment, the loading and unloading time for that. Whereas a few months later or about a year later, if for some reason there's an overall trend of increase in the loading time for whatever reason it might be, it is reflecting in their data. And if I run the machine learning model once again, at that point of time, I am up to date without any additional effort, right? I just have to press a run button and that's it. So that's the beauty of being able to plug in prediction as an ingredient, and also the composability aspect comes in, wherein you can piece in multiple different aspects at the same place in order to make your model better.
Yeah, as you're creating an engine. It seems crazy to think that someone who's not a full-blown data scientist could go in and be part of this creation of a prediction engine, but that's possible today with the way that you can set up the platform approach and the no-code approach to doing this. I love the dynamic part of it too. I think for sure that's a struggle area for people, is just keeping up with this and being able to, you can go right back into where you created the engine, retrain it, redeploy it, and push it out, and then you have that greatest version again that can work, like you said, Pushkar, not even in this problem, but in other problems as well. I love the idea of just trying to automate and dynamically populate these missing values and data in a much smarter way than we've ever done before.
When you think about why optimization, whether network design, supply chain design, became such a productized capability, I think this is where the next frontier comes, right? Using static assumptions doesn't cut it anymore. We need something that's dynamic to help us to extend those solutions and make those more robust.
Yep, I love that point. Luisa, something I wanted to chat with you about was about the data game and modeling. So we've all alluded to it here. I think we've all sat through more time in our life preparing data for models than actually modeling. Hopefully we're turning the tables on that now with modeling and analysis. But Luisa, talk a little bit about the idea of how we're able to deal with data. And in my mind, the always on part comes a lot with this data side. And people always separate the data preparation from the modeling for some reason. It shouldn't be separate, right? Like, you have to do it. It's not like you can separate it and not do it. So talk a little bit about what you've been able to do with customers now in this modeling and analysis world in terms of the data game that they're trying to play.
Yes, prior to Lyric, a lot of my role in modeling was, I would say, 90% data, 10% really just spending on the model and analyzing scenarios and actually adding value to the business. With Lyric, that completely changed. There are several ways by which you can not only automate that data aspect, but the fact that it's a platform, it sits in a way that I can already leverage information and data pipelines that have been already created by other teams in a way that I don't have to start always from scratch in everything. More importantly, I can leverage the pipelines that were created by a lot more knowledgeable teams on that specific area, and have a lot more time instead in spending in the actual decision and actual insight at hand, as opposed to the data. The other aspect is the ability to create data products out of it. In the current customer I'm working with right now, all of our second phase of our current implementation is being thought of how do we need to restructure their way they have thinking about their data, such as all they need to do is, depending on the request that is coming from the business, is tap a button to aggregate the data at the level they need and answer and get the insight into what they need. So there's a ton of functionality that Lyric provides in there, whether it's democratizing other teams' data products, whether it's leveraging nodes or building blocks that we already provide up front for what you, no matter what, will have to run into, that you can leverage combined within your solution to really spend most of the time on what matters most to the business.
Oh, I love the idea of the data product, right? I think you cannot underscore the value in being able to productize what you are doing with the data, right? So we have seen so many things that people have done with the data, right? So one is just, hey, what if I wanted to just productize the transportation cost creation, right? What if I just wanted to productize that flow that I do every single time, the cleaning, the cleansing, the filling in the missing values, the coming up with the numbers, right? Coming up with the transportation lanes. I've seen people create entire model build sequences, right? Model build data products, where I have created the repeatable flow, where I have some toggles in there, right? That's the other thing too. It doesn't have to be that this is only one way to do it. In these workflows, I can add some toggles that work for my business, that make sense to my business, right? These are the levers I want to pull when I'm changing the way that I build data for a model. I think that has been super, super powerful. But Brooke, one of the other things that I think is super interesting to me, I think this has come up time and time again, and not just on data going into the model, but also data coming out of the model, is this ability, and Luisa, you talk about this a lot too, but to tie in your own logic. That it's not just all about optimization. Optimization is a huge part. Prediction can be a huge part of this, but you can't underscore the ability to productize the logic that your company uses in its modeling. So talk about that a little bit. I know you have some great stories about that.
Yeah, to use a supply chain term, it's that last mile data processing. There is rarely a time that I feel that I've been able to deliver personally just an output of a model. And that's the final state that can drive the business change. And so making adjustments, whether it is simple syntax, right? How much time has gone in to say, hey, we had to aggregate products in a certain way, but that type of nomenclature doesn't make sense to the business. So we need to find a way to just make it look different so the business can understand it. That still takes time, that takes energy to do that. Or maybe it's bringing in some of the actuals to run comparisons against that data and to show pound for pound how the model is holding up against how the operations are really going. Those types of transformations, oftentimes up to this point, have had to happen somewhere else. And you have to go and you have to reprocess every time that model is done and build out those views and build out that data structure. And being able to take the algorithms, to take those engines as a building block and say, that's not the last piece of my puzzle. I'm going to do more transformation, more changes. Maybe I'm putting another engine after that first engine. Maybe it's data processing. Maybe it's joining in other data so I can show the business exactly what they need. That's so powerful. And when you see the modelers that use Lyric identify that's something they can do within the Lyric space, they light up because how many times do they have an ask to refresh the model? But what that means is not just refresh the model, but refresh the model in anything downstream from that action to go and get those views remade. And now it happens in an automated way within Lyric, which is amazing.
Yeah, I think something to add to that, I think that came off of some of the projects that we've been doing is how much you could downplay this. But if you change the name of a data field to something that's relatable to the customer, the business user, it makes a world of difference, right? So a lot of times in modeling tools, you're forced to use the vernacular that they've decided to call the fields and the names and stuff like that. Some of it is just pure translation from the model into your business speak, and being able to automate that, and even not automate it, just tailor it in the first place is huge. You just see the business be like, yeah, I can use that now because you're calling it boxes instead of products, or you're calling it whatever the terminology is that we use. It is huge on implementation, huge on pickup by the company. So I think we saw it somewhere. There was a product that we created for someone that was both routing and network optimization together in the same solution. And it was like, okay, they call this their shipment sheet or something. And so we could get in there and we just said, okay, we'll call it a shipment sheet. And they know exactly what they're going to upload. Like you don't have to teach someone to translate. This is your solution. We can make it look just like we need to. So let's talk a little bit about the connectivity here, right? It's no secret that this has always been a slow and disconnected process throughout. And I'd love to hear how you guys are thinking about how we're speeding this up and just scaling this for organizations, right? I think a lot of you have had these conversations with your customers, and that's one of the main goals, right? When we think about sustainability or being agile in this environment, how have you guys thought about this or seen this kind of come together? Go ahead, Luisa.
I think modeling in general is a very iterative approach. You have to bring in data, you have to understand the data, make sure what you are looking is what you should be in the first place adding to the model. We're working with a customer where it was shocking how one view that they would always build every time they would run a scenario, they would download the data and then build a pivot table to understand the scenario itself and what the scenario was doing. It was shocking to them to see how we built that really fast in Lyric. We realized we forgot to add a dimension by which we wanted to have in the report. We just added that, and the report was built again with all of the dimensions that they needed. In his word, he said, I cannot see myself doing this any other way. It allows you to be very nimble to what the needs of the business are, because it's so easy to go back and change and refresh and get the results you want. So that's, I think that's been by far the game-changing aspect from a modeling perspective.
My first customer at Lyric, so this is where I got to even grow with Lyric and with that customer. But they started out with a network model, trying to understand what the network looked like. And they're an omni-channel retailer. And so that initial network model was trying to identify where to put potential major DC. But then we turned around and from that network model, connected to that output to then solve a fulfillment capacity planning model. And then we also connected off that network model to then do essentially like some consolidation point analysis for how they want to fulfill some of their retail store footprint. And then we also went even further, focusing on just their e-commerce, built using, we'll say 80% of that data, but then we did it at a different level of granularity where we looked at order data, so digital order data, day of week, time of day, trying to back into if they can hit that critical pull time to make it to the shipper to then get to that final delivered time in their 2-day delivery window to the customer. And that was the metric that they were trying to maximize. So for me, that was a really powerful journey to go from an annual network model and then still leveraging much of that same data, connecting to a lot of that same data, but then solving almost a totally different question of if they could put a DC, a fulfillment center somewhere, how do they want to position that fulfillment center, knowing that critical pull time, knowing when orders are dropping, knowing when their transit times are, to then maximize that metric. So I thought that was a really powerful journey to be a part of that.
Very cool. Okay, the last question I'm going to ask you guys is, as we get into this, and as we're speaking to potential modelers, current modelers that are out there thinking about what's next in their evolution of this, what is your advice to them? How do they get into this, or how would they start to evolve over time? Do you have thoughts on that?
I can take that. What I see Lyric is that it's a leap in technology. With just an incremental effort that modelers have to put in, you are going to see huge benefits come out. You're not going to stick to your traditional way of designing the network models. It's going to be massive. The only limit that would be is, I think, your imagination. That's the modeler's imagination. Because the latest client that I've worked with, they had 15 different models in their current tool because they could not solve one massive problem in one go. They wanted to model the entire network right from the suppliers till the end customers, and that's why they had separate sections of the supply chain as different models. What we did in Lyric is we attempted to combine all of the models together and try to solve it as a single huge problem. And I'm actually proud in saying that we were very successful in doing that, and we could convert that POC into an actual customer. As I said, the only limitation would be the modeler's imagination. The business is going to keep demanding bigger and bigger choices that they want to make, which will require more and more complex models to build, which I think is possible in Lyric.
When I think about modelers and adopting or embracing the change to Lyric, I always relate it to whenever there's upgrades on technology that we use every day. I think about applications on our phones that are upgraded, and that initial experience when you open the app, you react to say, oh, this is different. Where is the thing that I'm used to? But very quickly we evolve and we can't even remember what the old application looked like. So while a change is always a challenge up front, I think in our experience with the customers we have today, there's this idea of like never looking back. It's like, how did I even do it before? This is just what it is. This is how we go forward. And that shift, because really in today's world, we're used to change, right? We're used to technology upgrading and evolving. Our modelers adapt quickly. It is a shift, but once you get into it and you start using it, I think it becomes all you know. And so that's been what I would challenge maybe modelers that are evaluating whether it's worth it. Just know that you're capable of that, and people have done it before, and it happens quick, and then you'll not know anything different.
I think my main advice is just remember 3 things. First of all, you can start small. With Lyric, you really can be very nimble with the approach you take. And then as you understand more of the problem and more of the capabilities that Lyric offer, you can iterate on that process and then become more sophisticated on what you want. The second thing is this tool really was built for leveraging the business context that a modeler brings along with the already modeling skills that you have. Everything else with the context of the problem you are trying to solve will become very natural to only solve that problem as opposed to having to relearn a tool that kind of feels forfeiting your problem to the tool instead. And the third is this is exciting. Prior to Lyric, I think my only key expertise was modeling and possibly anything around optimization. Now with Lyric, the world opens into predictions, machine learning. I never in a million years thought I could deploy and make actionable decisions out of a prediction model that I built. And it happened. And it's not that I have had to get into a master's of data science to do that. It really just is the fact of the platform being designed for leveraging all of my technical and modeling skills to in the context of the problem I'm trying to solve.
Yeah, so I think my take on that would be, I think where I get really excited about what Lyric opens up is, I think historically modeling has been limited to these point solutions, and so it results in these teams being isolated and off to the side. And very exciting about what Lyric offers is connecting those groups where instead of the deliverable of modeling being a PowerPoint or an insight or a learning, it needs to be a product. And that product can be in the hands of making daily executional decisions in the business if you want it. And I think, going back to your first question, Sarah, what do I remember? I remember being in a bullpen working on a network model and someone 2 desks over working on a rough cut capacity planning, making decisions that had nothing to do with my model. And ultimately, I think making decisions that my model was saying, don't do that. And I think I get very excited about the fact that we can transcend that, where modeling doesn't just mean strategic annual modeling. It means any decision that you're making in your business and having that be a decision that you know is the right decision for your business in that moment. And the more that you get that connected to live data, to predictions, to all the other capabilities that Luisa, Brooke, and Pushkar all mentioned, I think that's why we get so excited about the opportunities that our customers that are coming into Lyric are opening up. And we're so excited to see them go on that journey of just really testing the boundaries of what is modeling and analysis and turning that into decisions and values for their business.
That was a beautiful final statement, Austin.
Yeah. It was good. It was good. Okay. Thank you guys. This was such a fun conversation. We'll have to do more going forward. Parting words. We'd love to model with everyone out there. We're having so much fun and we're really excited about what's possible with this next journey into modeling and analysis. Thanks, guys.